welcome to the Feeling Good podcast, where you can learn powerful techniques to change the way you feel. I am your host, Rhonda Borowski, and joining me here in the Murrieta studio is Dr. David Burns. Dr. David Burns is a pioneer in the development of cognitive behavioral therapy and the creator of the new TEAM therapy. He is the author of Feeling Good, which has sold over 5 million copies in the United States and has been translated into over 30 languages. David is currently an emeritus adjunct professor of clinical psychiatry at Stanford University School of Medicine.
Last one was subdued, so I thought I better make up for it this time.
Oh, thank you. You know, Josh, who does our editing, said every time he edits it, he just thinks it's so funny the way, no matter what you say, I always laugh. But I honestly think it's sincerely funny.
We have a lot of Hello Rhonda fans out there. We have a few Hello Rhonda haters. Every now and then I get a slammed email. People think it's below the dignity of a psychiatrist or whatever they're thinking. But most people really like it.
Yeah, it's kind of a funny way to start the podcast. But anyway, welcome everyone to episode 222. We are going to do another Ask David with challenging questions from listeners like you guys.
And readers, maybe someone's reading the show notes.
I know. Well, I'm going to turn into a reader, and I'm going to read 2 endorsements that we got. One a really short one a little bit longer, but they're both very nice. One was about episode 218, which we did with Tyann Trung, who, when that episode, if you recall, was on treating women who were coping with postpartum depression, anxiety, and someone wrote in without giving their name, but they wrote, "Great podcast. Thanks, Tyann, and thank you both, Dr. Burns and Mrs. Rhonda." So that was probably from someone.
Kudos to Mrs. Rhonda.
Yeah, and Tyann, who was
Tyann, of
really
course,
awesome.
We love Tyann.
Yeah.
The response to that show in numbers, which I just looked at today, was a little below our normal Monday. And I thought that was disappointing for 2 reasons. First, Tyann is such a rocket ship of talent, brilliance, charm, humor, and enthusiasm and compassion. She is so awesome. But secondly, I thought we were really announcing a radical new understanding in the causes and treatment of postpartum depression, that it can be treated without drugs and can be treated quickly and with phenomenal results. To me, that's worthy of, if not the New York Times, at least the National Enquirer or something, or CNN,
Yes.
Because I think the way we're thinking about postpartum depression is kind of unhelpful, to be put it in the kindest way I can think of. It's telling people, you've got this biological disorder and you're going to be taking these pills. It's going to take a good year. It's just a demoralizing message. Plus, in our experience, it's just not true, because we see rapid, dramatic, complete recovery quickly without medications, using the new TEAM-CBT. And I was hopeful that would blow people's minds. But at any rate, we loved having Tyann on and hope to have her again. She is just absolutely wonderful.
She is. Yep.
And by the way, listeners, if you have some topics you want to hear us talk on, like some new TEAM techniques that we haven't covered yet, or of course you're sending wonderful questions all the time, and keep that up. But let us know if there's some angle that would be kind of sexy and exciting to people for a show.
Yeah, that would be really helpful. Well, here is another endorsement, and this is from Ishmael, and he wrote some things that were so touching to me when I read them. "Dear Dr. Burns, I am a 21-year-old male college student from Cairo, Egypt. I just wanted to reach out and express my gratitude for all your work. I'm currently reading your book, Intimate Connections, so I can meet interesting people and push out of my comfort zone. I was recently feeling very, very anxious, an 8 out of 10, and I had this dreadful thought that if I get nervous, anxious, and look uptight, people won't like me and they'll think I'm stupid. I was having a little trouble countering this thought with the daily mood log, Yet when I remembered the double standard technique, I immediately felt a swell of emotion. As I sat alone in my living room with pen and paper at hand, I wrote down the thought and began to respond to my thought as my friend. I started crying as I extended compassion to this friend. I expressed my pride in the positive qualities and the accomplishments I had made and really encouraged myself the same way I would encourage a close friend. This was a moment of great growth for me. I never thought I would be able to help myself to this extent without the presence of a therapist. I feel much better now, and again, I would like to extend my gratitude for all that you do to help others. Ishmael.
Thank you, Ishmael. That is so fantastic. That's music to our ears, and we feel so close to you, as if you were, right in the room with us now. And boy, that's just fabulous. Thank you so much, all of you, for every day we get tons. We can't read all of the beautiful emails that we get, but I read them all. I send them on to Rhonda. I reply to them on the website or on YouTube almost every time, and we're listening and grateful. One quick thing I forgot, I'm going to have this awesome workshop with Jill. Is it February 28th?
Yes.
And that will be on defeating the beliefs that defeat you and your patients. It'll be for therapists, and it's how to uncover your patient's self-defeating beliefs and how to modify your patient's self-defeating beliefs as well as your own. So this will be for mental health professionals, a tremendous training workshop in an area that will affect all of your patients with the achievement addiction, approval addiction, love addiction, perfectionism, perceived perfectionism, entitlement, blame, self-blame, Superman, Superwoman, conflict phobia, all of these beliefs that lead to depression and anxiety and troubled relationships. So it could be a good one. Whenever I do a podcast with Rhonda, I know it's going to be over the top because of the warmth and energy you bring. And it's the same with Jill. When we work together, yes. It's like being in heaven. She is such a genius teacher.
She is.
But such a warm and giving and kind and compassionate person at the same time. So you can find that on my website, feelinggood.com. Go to the resources tab and upcoming workshops, and there you'll find the link to register for that workshop. So we hope to see you there.
And don't you have other teaching opportunities on your website? Like you've talked about your depression class and your anxiety class. We haven't mentioned those much on the podcast. Could you just explain what those are?
Yeah, the purpose of my website, feelinggood.com, is to bring free teaching and healing to people all over the world, because I know so many people, even before the pandemic, people were short on money all over the world, and now it's even worse. And so the podcast you're listening to right now, I mean, this is a tremendous resource if you're looking for personal healing or therapy training. There's at least 2 free classes on my website, feelinggood.com. There's a free depression class and a free anxiety class. Those are geared for people who are depressed or anxious. And we might have a relationship class there too. I can't remember if that one's been posted yet. And then there's free blogs. I mean, there's all kinds of free, helpful stuff. And it really works because we get emails every day. Thank God, Dr. Burns, your podcasts have saved my life, or your book on panic attacks, like the fellow for Ishmael. But there's a few things you can buy, like my new book, Feeling Great. I hope you buy that, or the old book, Feeling Good. I hope you buy that, because that one is inexpensive and will cure you of depression in many cases. But there's just a lot of stuff there, and there's no hidden scams or no, you look at something and then you have to start paying for something. Well, everything there is kind of permanently and irreversibly free. And also tomorrow, Rhonda, you start this fabulous new weekly class for people from outside of the Bay Area. My Tuesday class at Stanford is free for Bay Area therapists. Now Rhonda has one starting tomorrow, although tomorrow meaning...
Well, this is being posted December 28th, so it would have been we've started it December 2nd, the class.
So it's like 3 or 4
and I'm really excited.
3 or 4 weeks ago this class started.
Yeah.
And
yeah, we have people from London, we have people from South Korea, Australia, India, and Peru.
Yeah.
As well as Canada and throughout the United States.
Yeah.
I'm really excited.
So that's going to be cool. And that's another totally free resource where you can come and get weekly training from Rhonda herself.
And Richard Lamb and Lee Harrington and a lot of really great small group leaders.
Yeah, you've got at least 7 or 8 fantastic co-teachers with you. So you'll come just like the Tuesday group. Points will be demonstrated and illustrated and role play demos, and then break into small groups and practice in the safety of a smaller group with a great leader. It's a fantastic training opportunity. If we were selling it, you'd be paying a lot for it, but it's gonna be absolutely free. And
so on your website, feelinggood.com, there's various tabs, and one of the tabs is called Learning Center. Is that where someone would go if they wanted to find the class on anxiety and depression?
You said Burning Center?
Learning.
Oh, I thought they said burning, like Burning Man.
Like a Burning Man center.
Learning Center. I have. That's the one tab I haven't done too much with yet. The Learning.
I think that's it.
Is that where the classes are?
I'm looking at it right now. I think so.
Oh, okay. Well, but there's stuff all over there on the homepage. So you can take tests. You can find out how depressed you are. Get a free readout on your depression, how anxious you are, how happy you are, how screwed up your relationship is, all kinds of goodies there. It's all free.
Can anybody find out how good their relationship is going?
Yeah, you can find that out too. Absolutely. You can measure it and see exactly how fantastic your relationship is.
Okay.
Or fantastically awful, which is mostly what people talk to me about.
Okay. Well, shall we dive into your Ask David questions? Okay, Jay asks, how do you treat individuals with personality disorders using TEAM-CBT? Dr. Burns, have you considered doing a podcast on using TEAM-CBT or CBT for borderline narcissistic or histrionic personality disorders? The interesting thing is those with personality disorders seem to blame everyone and everything for their problems but themselves. Also, what, if anything, could individuals do to not get attracted or quickly eject or reject when they encounter these folks? One theory is that folks with abusive or neglectful parents are more vulnerable because of the chaos and drama is familiar for them. I think many therapists avoid folks with personality disorders. No? Particularly patients with borderline personality disorder. It's interesting in that kids have years of relating to parents with personality disorders. So how would TEAM-CBT help? Just curious what your experience and Rhonda's experience is too. Jay.
Well, I'm going to get you to help with this answer because I have some things to say, but I didn't quite understand all of it when he was talking about are people attracted to people with personality disorders. And actually, a lot of men are attracted to women with borderline personality disorder. I don't know if it works in the other way. But that's kind of an issue of itself. TEAM-CBT emerged because of the inadequacy of CBT in dealing with patients with borderline personality disorders. I always had tons of patients at my clinic in Philadelphia with borderline personality disorder. And for listeners who aren't familiar with it, it's a severe form of depression, and it comes on in adolescence typically and persists throughout adulthood. And people with this so-called disorder or this type of depression tend to be suicidal. They use the term manipulative. I don't know quite what that means, but they'll idolize you typically at the first evaluation, and then they're into all or nothing thinking, and then they decide you're letting them down, and then they become enraged with you. You go from 100 to 0. They tend to mutilate themselves frequently with razor blades, typically, or if they can't get a knife or razor blade, they'll break a light bulb and rip into their into their flesh. And they are often making suicide threats and causing great upset and emotional disturbance to the people around them. So a lot of therapists get pretty good at figuring out if a new referral has borderline personality disorder and not getting involved with these kinds of patients because of the emotional turmoil and the liability, really. But it's because of patients like that that I developed TEAM-CBT, that it emerged out of the ashes of those kinds of failed therapeutic relationships. And so the empathy is especially important in working with individuals with borderline personality disorder, and exceptionally important is the accountability, the agenda setting, the bringing the resistance conscious awareness, and making the patients accountable, as well as the many podcasts we've had on the techniques to deal with suicide and demand that the patient, if you want to work with me, you have to make an agreement never to make a suicide attempt for the rest of your life. And if that's too stiff a price to pay, I totally understand, but I'm not the one for you. And I did publish a paper in the top psychology journal, Journal of Consulting and Clinical Psychology, that patients with borderline personality disorder that were treated at my clinic in Philadelphia, and 28% of our patients had that diagnosis at the initial evaluation, because we got the referral of all the toughest patients, and I never turned anyone away. Other clinics would send us the patients they didn't want, but they recovered almost as quickly from depression as patients without this diagnosis, and I thought that was very encouraging. My last thing that I would say is that we don't treat just so-called disorders; we treat human beings, and so the treatment of someone who is called narcissistic personality disorder, or histrionic personality disorder, or borderline personality disorder would not be where we're going in to try to fix a diagnosis, but asking the patients, do you want help? What do you want help with? And what would it be worth to you if we agreed to work with you? Would you do daily homework assignments, for example, even if you're not in the mood? And so I would say that a lot of brilliant stuff exists in the new TEAM-CBT, which works fantastically for people without these so-called personality disorders. But it exists thanks to patients with borderline personality disorder. And DBT gets all the publicity. Oh, this is the treatment for borderline personality disorder. And indeed, it can be helpful to many people. But I think that TEAM-CBT has every bit the punch as DBT or any form of therapy for that matter, and possibly more powerful.
Mm-hmm. I've actually come to the place now where I feel pretty confident that if anyone comes to me with any issue, if I just, use the TEAM-CBT model and all the techniques and the various, like identifying distortions and, identifying self-defeating beliefs. I mean, there's lots of avenues that you can take using TEAM-CBT that I might think sometimes, oh, it's interesting. I think this person has this personality disorder, or maybe they have that personality disorder, but it doesn't derail me, because it just sticking to the TEAM-CBT model, you could really treat anyone.
Yeah, absolutely. So did you understand this thing about being attracted to people with, he was speculating or something. I do think there is a kind of weird attraction that many people have to individuals with borderline personality disorder. They're very challenging. I always found them very challenging to work with, and kind of enjoyed that challenge, but they can put you through hell too. And
Correct.
That's why a lot of therapists sadly avoid them. And then the way the laws are set up, if someone does commit suicide, there's some attorney who's going to decide it was your fault and going to try to sue you for all you're worth. And so society puts, I think, mean-spirited legal ramifications in our treatment of some of the most desperate and needy individuals.
I don't know. I think it's hard to speculate on why somebody is attracted to another person. there's a million reasons why.
Yeah, we have no idea. All we can say for sure is all speculations will be proven false.
Right.
Once you get the data, because we love to theorize about things, but I do a lot of research with databases, and so I can test hypotheses. And the computer program that I use called SEM, Structural Equation Modeling with Amos, 100% of the time it tells me the theory cannot possibly be correct. You represent the theory with a mathematical model, and then you estimate it on the computer and see if the model fits. And these theories that people have are never consistent with the data.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's go on to Jeff.
Yeah.
Jeff asks, can you talk more about the great death of the therapist helping or rescuing self? That was really helpful to me. Hi, Dr. Burns. I love what you've taught on the death of the selves, and recently read The 4 Great Deaths of the Therapist's Ego in your new book, Feeling Great. One part that I found so helpful was the death of the helping, rescuing self. I think I've believed that's my purpose. That's why I'm here. I'm here to help the client feel better and to live a rich, full, meaningful life. That's something I've struggled with, because if I'm not there to help, what am I there for? And if I don't feel like I've helped, then I've failed the client. I love to hear this concept expanded on. I think many therapists, coaches, etc., would benefit from seeing how they can work with clients without thinking they have to help them or rescue them. Thank you, Dr. Burns. And P.S., your new book is a goldmine. I'm enjoying it immensely.
Well, thank you, Jeff. Any question that ends up with telling me my new book is a gold mine is going to get 5-star ratings on our to read list on a podcast. But I appreciate your kind comments. Well, it's a cool question for 2 reasons. First, the giving up this idea that I have to help or rescue the patient is the biggest breakthrough in TEAM, and that's the secret of the power of TEAM. But at the same time, it's challenging to learn or grasp or understanding, and even more challenging to learn how to do it. And that's why we have these free training classes, as well as the Feeling Good Institute has paid online classes that are also tremendous to learn how to do this. But it's fairly simple in a way. But the essence of it is that if you come to me and you're really hurting with obsessive compulsive disorder or depression or failed marriage or whatever, on the one hand, you're asking for help. But at the same time, there are powerful factors that are causing you to be depressed or to be anxious and panicky, or to have a troubled relationship with whoever it is that you're not getting along with. And if I don't take those factors into account and try to sell you on whatever technique I use to help people, whether it's cognitive therapy or EMDR or ECT or ACT or psychoanalysis or, whatever we're peddling, whatever school of therapy you belong to, without taking these into account, that the patient will start yes-butting you. And that's why 50% or more of patients fail in outcome studies and in private practice as well. I've often referenced a study of, it was in the Midwest, of some series of clinics that had hundreds of therapists treating thousands of patients. And they asked the patients, how many of your patients drop out prematurely? And the clinicians estimated 15%. And then how many of your colleagues' therapists drop out prematurely? And they estimated 30%. Well, right off the bat, you can see something's kooky here, because all the therapists think they're on average twice as good as their colleagues. Right. But the true answer was 65%. Wow. They 2/3 of their patients just dropped out of therapy, and the therapist didn't really seem to notice, because you're focusing on the ones who stick with you. And the reason patients drop out is usually because of some kind of conflict that develops with the therapist, where the therapist really isn't helping them, and therapist is pushing something and the patient is pushing back. And so the secret of TEAM is to say, well, yes, I'd love to work with you. I've got fantastic tools to help you with your depression, to help you with your panic attacks, to help you with your troubled marriage, or whatever it happens to be. But before we use those tools, let's look at all the reasons for you not to change. Let's look what your symptoms show about you that's positive and awesome, and how your negative feelings and negative thoughts might be helping you. And then we typically come up with a list of 15, 20, or even more positives. And this can't be like positive affirmations or some gimmick. It has to be real positives that are conveyed through the patient's symptoms, things that are very flattering to the patient and are a reflection of the patient's core values. And unless the patient lets you take that into account, when you try to push change on people, they're going to push back. And that's the cause of all therapeutic failure, is the therapist's misguided but understandable attempt to rescue or help the patient without finding out really how the patient feels and bringing to conscious awareness all the reasons why the patient may not want to change. A simple example in Philadelphia, just to disguise things, a young woman was hospitalized with severe obsessive compulsive disorder. And she was afraid of handling knives or anything sharp because she's afraid she'd stab her mother. Oh. And so she had elaborate rituals of avoiding like silverware or anything that could be sharp or dangerous, and it consumed her life, and she ended up in the hospital. She was so paralyzed by obsessive compulsive disorder. Now, if you jump in there and try to help her with psychotherapy, as well as medications, you'll run into a wall of resistance because there's a reason that she's all bound up like this. And so, first of all, you have to bring that to conscious awareness. And then secondly, you have to deal with process resistance. What'll she have to do that she won't want to do if she wants to be cured? Like, she can be cured in an hour, totally. But if you start pushing techniques on her, there's pretty much 100% cause of failure. You have to treat the human being and find out why they have these symptoms. Now, a little further talk with her revealed that, sadly, she had a younger brother who developed intractable schizophrenia at an early age, severe, where he's never going to be able to function independently. And the mother and dad started telling her, the patient who ended up with OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, when your brother gets older, you're going to have, when we die, you're going to have to take care of him because he can never function independently. And then, in addition, they were giving her brother, tons of attention. And so what is some emotion that this young woman might be having toward her mother? She has fantasies she's going to kill her mother. Well, why is she having that fantasy? Why does she have a fantasy about killing ants or slicing the leaves off trees?
Well, she sounds furious at her mother.
Yeah, and why is she upset with her mother?
Well, perhaps she doesn't want to take care of her brother when she doesn't want the burden of her brother.
You mean a budding teenage girl doesn't want to have the burden? You mean she wants to go on dates and have sex and listen to crazy music and have fun with her friends?
Yes.
So,
and she wants some attention too. She wants some parenting.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So if you don't bring those hidden emotions to conscious awareness, and then if you want to work with me, would you be willing to talk with your mother and express these feelings rather than acting them out through these symptoms. See, anxiety is always telling us something about feelings that we're hiding from ourselves. And if you try to treat the person without bringing this into conscious awareness, it's shabby, foolish treatment, because you're not understanding what's going on with your patient. And so the first thing is she'd have to agree to open up and start talking about her feelings. But people say, oh, women talk about their feelings, men don't know how to. Listen, there are no women in the United States that know how to talk about their feelings. Women don't and men don't. We all make this mistake of kind of hiding our feelings. But that's the first thing. And then the second thing she's going to have to do, if she wants to be cured in an hour, which is totally easy.
Let's say can we just say 2 hours?
2 hours, yeah. 2 hour
you have to give her some
session,
empathy.
right.
Yeah.
But the actual cure will happen in about 60 seconds at a certain moment in that session. But the other thing, she's going to have to sit in a room with all kinds of knives with her mother and hold them while talking to her mother. Is she going to want to do that?
Nope.
Can she?
And neither will her mother.
Can she be cured without doing that?
Nope.
No. So that's called the gentle ultimatum. So that's the whole thing about treating people with a method that will work, that will bring them rapid joy and cure and quickly. But you have to make a person accountable and recognize all the forces that are holding them back. And that's not a bad thing. It's a great thing for patients to suddenly see, oh, that's what's going on. I'm not a loony with a brain disorder. I have good reasons to be upset and to feel burdened. And any young woman who's worth her spice or worth being alive is going to have feelings and personality and excitement and sexual drive and loving drive. And that's all beautiful stuff. And you don't have to be squashing that and feeling like you've got to be a nurse forever for your brother. She'll certainly have some responsibilities at some point, but right now that's not the issue. The issue is all of these unexpressed emotions. So that's essentially it, Jeff. You've asked a fabulous question, and many therapists are just looking for a formula, like ACT. I mean, we just had the founder, Stephen Hayes, a wonderful person on the program, but it sounded to me kind of like ACT. That's how the therapy works. I don't even remember what the letters stand for. It's probably fabulous. I just don't understand it.
Yeah, acceptance and commitment therapy.
But therapists are looking for formulas, and formulas don't cure people.
Well, what you're actually you're talking about, that therapists need to take into account the need for the patient to actually see the beauty of their symptoms, or what's good about them.
Right.
And the other thing that we do in TEAM-CBT is we teach people to no longer need to be in therapy.
Yeah.
Like we teach them to challenge their thoughts, and so eventually they can, when they do that on themselves. Yeah. And if we help them too much, they're not going to learn the independence and how to self-soothe.
In fact, the role of the therapist in TEAM-CBT is to become the patient's resistance. Everything is paradoxical. The patient has to convince me to work with him or her. I'm not going to convince any patient to work with me. It's the other way around. Now, I'll be an easy sell if they want to convince me, but I'll be showing them on every step of the way why they shouldn't change and why they haven't changed and why they have these symptoms and what that shows about them that's actually awesome and positive. But even in the testing is paradoxical, the empathy is paradoxical. Like we want the patients to attack us in the empathy and show us everything we're doing wrong. The agenda setting or assessment of resistance is totally paradoxical. And then the methods are paradoxical, like in externalization of voices. We verbalize the patient's negative thoughts to the patient, and then the patient has to defeat us. We're always playing the role of the patient's negativity. It's hard to learn, challenging, almost impossible for some people to learn. Maybe it's too tough for some therapists. But if you're committed and learn it, it's awesomely powerful. Beautiful question, Jeff. Thank you.
Thank you. And Darkmana asks, hey, David, are there any books about Buddhism you would recommend? I can see you're a fan of it from Feeling Great.
Yeah.
That's the question.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, great. Well, thank you. You've asked Darkmana. I don't know who you are. Sounds like dark manna from heaven. And your questions are certainly fabulous. I don't know anything about Buddhism, actually. I've never read anything about it, and I've never attended any classes or lectures or anything like that. Every now and then I've heard people say, oh, the Buddha said this or the Buddha said that. And I think about those things and they don't make sense to me. Like the Buddha says the world is one. I said, that's stupid. The world isn't one.
God, David.
You know,
But when you were in college, did you take a comparative religion class?
No,
or anything like
nothing, nothing at all. But I say the world is one. Now, this is a pen in my hand. You can't see it, but Rhonda can see it. I'm holding it up to the camera. And the world is one. Well, the world isn't one because nobody ever called me Pan, or no one ever called my pen David. We're two separate things.
How do you actually know, if you haven't read Buddhism, no offense, how do you know that the Buddha has said the world is one?
I just heard it. I don't know if it's true or not. It sounded cool, and I wanted to think about it. And then in therapy, I realized, oh my gosh, that's true. Because when I'm working with a patient, if I hurt that patient, I hurt myself. If there have been times when I said something that hurt a patient's feelings, they got all upset, and that felt like I was getting kicked in the stomach. And when I help a person recover and they feel joy, I feel joy. So I suddenly say, I kind of see what that means. And then different times people have walked up to me and just said things like about, oh, did you know the Buddha said this?
Because they know you gave the impression of being interested in it.
Well, these are sometimes people I didn't even know.
Oh.
Like I was walking down the street in Bryn Mawr, and this young man walked up to me, and I didn't know who he was. And he said, you know that the Buddha said that you can only change yourself for one moment. And it takes hundreds or thousands of reincarnations to change yourself for one brief moment. But if you could do that, you would experience enlightenment. And because the universe is one, the whole universe would experience enlightenment at the same moment. And then he walked off. And I said, who is that guy? And what is that? Stuff sounds ridiculous to me. And then that led to team therapy, the fractal.
What?
Yeah, that's what we do.
The
team,
fractal.
that's all what team therapy is all about. We focus on one moment when the patient is upset, and all the patient's problems are encapsulated in that one moment. And when the patient changes at that one moment, all of their problems fall apart like a house of cards. And many of my patients and yours go into enlightenment at the moment of recovery.
Right.
And then you feel such a glow that everyone around you becomes enlightened at the same time, and everyone responds to you differently. So it's just been stuff like that. But I don't know anything about it. But I'm a good bullshitter about it, and nobody challenges me ever on my bullshit. I was in the restaurant with my son. There's this Buddhist fast food restaurant. It used to be down on Castro Street in Mountain View, but now it's out near San Antonio Road in Palo Alto. But it's a noodle house, and the tables are all together. Like you'll be sitting at a table, and then right next to you will be another couple, and you share the condiments. And they bring you, it's really inexpensive. It's fantastic. They've got the best coconut. Now it's called Lulu's Noodle House here in Palo Alto or Los Altos. And it is to die for. It's dirt cheap, and the food is just unbelievable. They've got fresh coconut juice. They've got the best fresh squeezed orange juice you can find anywhere. But at any rate, I was sitting there with Eric once, and we were eating, and there was this Asian woman and an elderly Asian man in the booth next to us. But there's no separation. I mean, it's almost like you're sitting at the same table. And they seem to be talking about Buddhism. And I was mentioning to Eric, I was at this workshop, and I was BSing about Buddhism, for 2 days. It was an anxiety disorders, and the audience seemed to like it, and I don't really know what I'm talking about, but it doesn't seem to make any difference. And I just say, Buddha said this and Buddha said that, and people seem to love it.
Oh my gosh.
And then the woman next to us said, oh, you're mentioning Buddhism, are you? And I said, yes. I just did a 2-day workshop for mental health professionals. We had about 300 of them. I was teaching them for 2 days about how to defeat anxiety, but I would, kind of BS about Buddhism this or Buddhism that, and they liked it. And she said, oh, that's interesting. She said, have you studied Buddhism? and I said, no, I haven't studied it. I don't know anything about it. I'm just kind of a bullshitter. And then I said, what do you do? And she said, I'm the head of the Buddhist church in South Korea.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm here at Stanford to develop a new Buddhist, studies center.
Oh, wow.
And the fellow she was with was some acupuncturist guy. And I was really embarrassed. I said, oh, I'm really embarrassed and ashamed because I am just kind of a fraud. And I don't know anything about Buddhism, but I just love talking about it. And she said, so you were teaching 300 mental health professionals for 2 days about Buddhism, and you're just a bullshit artist, and you don't know anything about it? And I said, yes, that's the absolute truth.
Oh my gosh.
And then she says, oh, you're a true Buddhist then. So she was very, very kindly. But I feel like I fit right in there with the Buddhist crowd. But I just love the teachings. There's so much wisdom compressed into these statements. So that's my answer.
Yeah. Okay, good. Let's move on to the next question.
Oh, by the way, is
no, don't talk about it.
Tell them who you're inviting to be on the podcast with David.
Well, I did send a copy of your new book, Feeling Great, to the Dalai Lama, to His Holiness. It is right now languishing. It hasn't reached him yet. It's languishing in the New Delhi airport. I have to do some other administrative paperwork to get it to him.
Oh.
But, Michael, my husband's helping me, and Dipti in India is helping me. So we're going to get the book to the Dalai Lama.
Well, we would be so
eventually
tickled and thrilled and honored to have him on our podcast.
And then within that book, I asked him if he would be on the podcast. But the more you talk about it, if he listens to this podcast, I mean, maybe he, Anyway, let's not.
Well, I hope he has a sense of humor. I think the Buddha had a sense of humor, and I think a lot of Buddhism you learn through laughter. But sometimes when I tell Buddhist jokes at workshops, people laugh and they love it. But then afterwards, some serious Buddhist student will come up and say, "Oh, you shouldn't make jokes about the Buddha. That's so disrespectful." This type of thing. I think, come on, give me a break.
But people really say that about all the. Huh? People say that whenever you make jokes about whatever religion, someone will say, don't make jokes about Judaism.
All the time. Yeah. I say, Jesus had a sense of humor. Buddha had a sense of humor. Moses did too.
Yeah.
So let's not take ourselves so seriously. But anyway, next question. These are great questions today. I'm glad you chose
So
these.
Angela, and is her last name, do you say Poke?
No. It's Poach. I've been calling her Poe, and she said it's Poach, and that I always knew she was a good egg, and now I know why. I've always loved poached eggs.
Well, she is talking about the evaluation of therapy score, the evaluation of therapy session. When she asks this question, what's a perfect score on your empathy test? Hi, David. In the weekly practice group that I host, the question came up today, what does Dr. Burns mean by no less than 20 points? Is it the first section titled Therapeutic Empathy, which is 20 points total, or the entire survey, which is 20 questions? Warmest blessings, Angela Poach. But could you please start off by explaining what the evaluation of therapy session form is?
Sure, because we haven't done that since probably our first podcast was on first or second podcast, Feeling Good podcast, was on measurement. But after each session, every patient takes a form called the evaluation of therapy session. And there's 5 empathy questions. Was the therapist warm? Did the therapist understand how you feel inside? Was the therapist trustworthy? And each of the 5 questions goes from 0 to 4, like not at all or completely true. And so a perfect score on the empathy test would be 20. And then there's a helpfulness scale. How helpful was the therapist? And that's 5 items, and the score goes from 0 to 20. And then there's a satisfaction scale. And then did you have feelings you were hiding during the session? And were there survey questions that you had trouble answering honestly? And then they write down what did they like the least, what turned them off during the session, and what did they like the best. And this is really an eye-opener. Well, the first scale, the empathy scale that goes from 0 to 20, a 20 is the lowest passing grade. You have to have a perfect score to pass. And if you have a 19, it's a failing grade. And people say, well, you're such a perfectionist, you know.
Wait, but you're talking about you want them to have a 20 in the therapeutic empathy section, and you want them to get a 20 in the helpfulness of the session.
Yes, although
yes.
the helpfulness of the session might take 2 or 3 sessions to get up to a 20, but the empathy, you should be able to hit a 20 right away, because even 1 point off on that scale means something important that the therapist should talk to the patient about. Like if the patient says you were very warm and supportive, but not completely, the patient is saying, I really didn't get that warmth from you. They're condemning you with faint praise, and that's something you want to talk to them about the next session. And so I try to make failure as easy as possible for therapists. So I set up my scales to where most therapists will have failing grades on all the scales at every session with every patient. And why is that? Because failure is where all the therapeutic breakthroughs come. The problem is never failing, but your shame about it or being defensive about it. And if the patient says you didn't understand how I felt inside, you were very good, but not totally good, then I say, that's so important. Tell me about, I felt too like I was missing the boat with you, like I'm not really seeing the world through your eyes. Talk about it. Tell me about it. I don't know if I'm missing anger or loneliness, but I really want to hear what you have to say. And then the heavens open up. So that's why a perfect score on the empathy scale alone is 20. And you want to explore with the patient any items that they're marking you down on, because that's where the gold is located in the mind.
But you talk about the anti-perfectionism in terms of one of the 4 great deaths of the ego. But doesn't the quest for 20, the perfect score, push therapists into perfectionism?
Well, I don't have to push anyone into perfectionism. Most of us were perfectionistic at the moment of birth. Albert Ellis said he thought perfectionism is totally inherited, and that could be true. We always think it's up to childhood upbringing, but no one's ever proven that. But we don't know. But I want therapists to get used to failure, and to not be afraid of failure. The problem is never your failure. I've often said the therapist's worst failure is your greatest success in disguise. If you just relax and talk to the patient about where have I missed the boat, and let's get on the same page together. But it does cause the death of the therapist's ego, especially when you're first learning TEAM, because most therapists think wrongly, and one's listening to this program right now, that they are reasonably empathic. And if you use my evaluation of therapy scale with every patient at every session, plus the brief mood survey, how your patients feel at the beginning and end of sessions, you'll learn a lot of information that's very troubling to you, but it can transform your practice and your personal life as well. I recently gave a talk and learned that sadly, that a very beautiful person, a renowned mental health professional, had lost his life.
Oh no!
Yeah, and that it was self-inflicted.
Oh no!
And it was just incredibly sad and tragic, because he was just a warm and beautiful man who supported others and mentored others and had a huge impact on the field. He was beloved, and And I guess he'd been struggling, kind of unknown to most people, with depression, and had even endured some fairly brutal treatments. But I'll just bet you $1 to a dime that, and I don't know this, and I'm not trying to blame anyone, but people say suicide can't be predicted. I say suicide can always be predicted. That's why I use the brief mood survey, because we assess suicidal impulses at the start of the session and at the end of the session. And while people won't be honest 100% of the time, in my experience, they'll be honest 99% of the time or 90% of the time. And then if you know the person is suicidal, you can intervene and save their life. But the way people are on the inside and the way they look on the outside, even to the therapist, can be radically different. And that's why I think these assessment instruments can not only transform your practice and make you a far better therapist, but they can save lives. But a lot of it involves the death of the therapist's ego, because therapists might not enjoy at first discovering that your perception of how depressed your patient is way inaccurate, or how anxious, or how suicidal, or how the patient feels about you. But if you're willing to endure the heat, and it's been painful for me on many occasions, but once your ego dies, you come right back to life, and you then suddenly have a much better relationship with your client or your spouse. When they say, Dr. Burns, you're not helping me, it hurts to hear that. It makes you mad. It makes you feel ashamed. But if you say, yeah, it hurts me to hear that, because I think the world of you, but you're right, the tests show you're not improving. The therapeutic relationship is not even that good. I haven't done a great job. And it's sad for me to hear this, and I can imagine how lonely and disappointed and ticked off you're feeling. But let's talk about it. This conversation can bring us closer together, and I can see where I've been missing the boat. And we can develop do some tremendous work together. I still believe that. And then tell me, I want to hear, and then the patient will suddenly open up, and then you have a chance to connect and maybe even hit a home run. But without the assessment instruments, it's not going to happen.
Right. Okay, let's go on to Margaret.
Margaret, yeah.
Margaret asks, what can you say to a patient who doesn't want to push the magic button? Hi, Dr. Burns. I attended your intensive in Atlanta, and I'm working on my level 3 certification. TEAM-CBT has transformed my life personally and transformed my practice professionally. I will be forever grateful to your hard work and dedication in developing this approach. My burning question is about the magic button, magic dial. After the positive reframe, when we ask, with all these awesome things your negative emotions show about you and all the benefits you get from them, why would you want to press this button? 95% of the time, my clients argue for change, and that's great. My problem is when they say, I guess I wouldn't want to push that button. I feel like I'm cheating them by not offering the magic dial. It seems like all or nothing thinking. If you press the magic button, all of these positive things will go away. They never get the chance to even learn about the magic dial, and then may never get the chance to learn about cognitive distortions and all of the other cool methods you and others have created. My clients always benefit from the positive reframing. How much do they have to argue for change? How critical is this? Maybe I'm thinking about this all wrong. I could really use some guidance. Thank you so much, Margaret.
Yeah, well, that's a great question there, Margaret. The questions you listeners submit are just cool ass, to quote the Buddha.
I'm sure the Buddha said that.
They're really thoughtful and neat. I think, and just on a general level, you always want to follow your inclination. TEAM is not a set of rigid rules. It's a set of guidelines. And so you might want to violate a rule and go in some opposite direction, and often that'll work too. I violate my own rules all the time. I follow spontaneity to a great degree. But when a patient says, I guess I wouldn't want to press that.
But can I just say something before you answer her?
Yep.
She may have the the sequence wrong.
Oh.
Because it sounds like she's going through the positive reframing and then asking the magic button question. And actually, you ask the magic button question before you do the positive reframing.
Oh, yeah,
You've gone through the daily mood log and you've identified the moment in time that they're suffering from. You've identified the emotions that they're feeling and how strongly they're feeling them. And then the negative thoughts that they have that are driving these emotions. And then you say, hey, if I had a magic button that I could send to you through the Ethernet nowadays over Zoom, would you, and if you push this button, it's magic. So all of your challenging feelings and your negative thoughts would magically go away. Would you push the button? And then they say, yeah, or they say no. And then you can then say, well, I would be actually reluctant to have you go through to push the magic button because I think these thoughts and feelings say beautiful, positive things about you, or they're protective of you, or they speak to your core values. And then you do the positive reframing. And then after the positive reframing, you ask that pivot question. Now that you have all the beautiful things that your thoughts and feelings say about you, do you want to push the button? Why would you want to push the button?
Yeah.
Because if you push the button, then all of these positive things will go away as well as your the negative thoughts and challenging feelings. And if they say, well, yeah, I don't want to push the button, I don't want these positive things to go away, then you do offer them the magic dial. Well, what if we had a magic dial? So instead of pushing the button and having them all go away, we had this dial and we could dial them down so that we can keep the part of them that's connected to these positive aspects of yourself, but eliminate the pain and the suffering that they cause.
Beautiful teaching there. That's absolutely correct. At either point, if the patient says, I don't want to press the magic button, I would just empathize with the patient and just say something like, I love what you're saying right now. There's a lot of reasons not to press this magic button and have all your negative thoughts and feelings disappear. Tell me what you're thinking about. I think you're onto some very good things. And then I would empathize and then to see if I could reestablish the agenda with the patient. What is it that he or she wants help with? We've also got, before you do any of this, the magic button, the magic the miracle cure.
The miracle cure.
Yeah, like you've been telling me about, or even the invitation step. Right. In the last 30 minutes, you've been telling me about problem X, Y, and Z. And I'm wondering, is there something there that you'd be wanting my help with in today's session? Or do you need more time to talk? And if they say, well, I really want help, so say, what is the problem you want help with? And then once they tell you what the problem is, a marital conflict or depression or panic attacks or social anxiety or whatever it is, then you would say, great. Now, suppose I agreed to help you with your social anxiety. That's one of my strong cards there. I love teaching social anxiety. But what kind of change would happen in today's session? Suppose a miracle happened. You went out of the session and say, wow, that session blew my mind. What would you be asking for? I can't promise a miracle, but I'd like to know what miracle you'd be hoping for. And so then you find out what the person wants. And then you can go into all of the magic button and the magic dial and the positive reframing. So that's another thing, and it may have to do with how you're setting up the session and what's the problem they want help with. Maybe they're complaining about someone they don't get along with, their brother or a neighbor or a colleague or their spouse, and they actually don't want to get close to that person. Well, they're certainly not going to want to press that magic button. Or maybe they have an addiction to alcohol or food or whatever their addiction happens to be, and they are there to tell you about their addiction because the judge ordered them to go into treatment for a DUI or something, and they secretly don't want to get rid of their addiction. They kind of like their addiction. So It's too bad Margaret can't be here to describe the case, but
right, that would be fun.
It's certainly an awesome question, and hopefully
and also it's a point that you make all the time, that it's not really the job of the therapist to persuade the patient to work on one of the things that they brought up. It's the patient's job to persuade the therapist.
Yeah, and Margaret could say to the patient, "Hey, I feel sad now that you don't want help with that problem. I've got some fabulous tools, and I have no doubt that if we work together, we could certainly change your negative thoughts and feelings. But it's important that you're telling me that maybe you don't want that to happen. Tell me why. I want to see the world through your eyes," and go back to empathy, and then reestablish the therapeutic agenda.
Nice. I love that answer. So, we've been talking for an hour, and we have 2 more, but we've been trying to limit our podcast so that they don't go on forever. Should we save these last 2 for next time?
We'll just say what they are. Josh asks, what are the most effective types of psychotherapy homework assignments? So we'll go into the best ones for depression, anxiety, relationship problems, habits, and addictions. And then Hassam asks, how would you treat my severe OCD? Exposure doesn't seem to be working. What a cool question. And of course, I've always taught you can't treat anything with exposure. Exposure is not a treatment for OCD or any anxiety disorder, just a tool. And you have to use a systematic approach. And there's 4 powerful healing dimensions for all anxiety disorders. And if you incorporate all of them, you've got a great shot at it. If you throw techniques at patients like, oh, you have OCD, let's do exposure, that's just a formula for disaster. And then Ted asks, does any psychiatric disorder result from a chemical imbalance in the brain? And we will give a correct and definitive answer in the next Ask David.
Okay, cool. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Until next time. And thanks, David.
Thanks, Rhonda. It's just always fabulosa working with you.
Yeah, that's all great.
That's what the Buddha said 2,500 years ago.
I'm sure.
Fabulosa. Bye, everyone.
This has been another episode of the Feeling Good podcast. For more information, visit Dr. Burns' website at feelinggood.com, where you will find the show notes for this episode under the podcast page. You will also find archives of previous episodes and many resources for therapists and non-therapists. We welcome your comments and questions. If you want to support the show, please share the podcast with people who might benefit from it. You could also go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating. The theme music is Gypsy Jazz in Paris, 1935, composed and performed by Brett Van Donsel. I am your host, Rhonda Borowski. We hope you enjoyed this episode. I invite you to join us next time for another episode of the Feeling Good podcast.